go back to the football channel. We bring on our friend and yours, Bill Roth, longtime voice of the Virginia Tech Hokies, Syracuse grad in his own right. And you get to come back to the Dome this week, Bill. That's got to be a blast for you coming up this weekend.
It'll be my first time calling a game at the Dome since 2002. So I hope I know where to go when we get over there on Saturday morning.
Directions are similar. The booth slightly different from 22 years ago. You'll be in a slightly different location. That game was wild. If that's the last time you were here, that was the triple overtime game back in 2002. So a lot's happened since then. But, man, if we have anything like that on Saturday, that'd be something to talk about.
Yeah, that was wild. That was a high-scoring game. Lots of NFL players on both teams. There was a lot on the line. It always seemed like the Hokies, it's funny, Brian, the last 6 times Tech has come to the Dome, they've been ranked, and 5 of the 6 they've lost. So it's kind of been a real tough place for Virginia Tech to play on the road. But, of course, that was 20 years ago. Most of the guys on these 2 teams weren't born back in the Big East era, of course. But it has not been a good place for the Hokies over the years, traditionally. It is always disturbing to think about that, Bill, but it's very true. Like most of the guys, they don't remember it because they literally weren't alive yet. It was Dino Babers' first year the last time Virginia Tech was here in the Dome in 2016. That was the famous Cuse win, the Whose House, Our House, in the locker room after, and the last 2 games between these teams have both been down in Blacksburg, with the Orange winning one and then just getting absolutely blown out last year. All right, let's get into this team here, Bill. There was high expectations, right, this year. Then you come out and lose to Vanderbilt, and at the time people were like, oh man, you lost to Vanderbilt. I guess in hindsight, Vandy's actually pretty good here. It's not actually a bad loss. How was that all taken in at the time, and how have the thoughts on that changed here maybe as the season's gone along? Well, I think at the time we had no idea how good Diego Pavia would be. We had no idea that Vandy would go on to beat Alabama and play Texas so close. I think what bothered Virginia Tech fans the most is the only reason the Hokies lost in overtime, but the only reason the game went to overtime is Tech had a penalty for duplicate numbers on a punt return. And that moved Vanderbilt into field goal range, which they made, and that's why we ended up going to overtime. So that's a bitter pill to swallow. And then, of course, the Miami loss, which Virginia Tech thought it had won the game at the end of the fourth quarter down at Hard Rock. So there have been 2 very painful losses. They didn't play particularly well at Vanderbilt, so they probably didn't deserve to win the game. And the same with the Rutgers home game. So it's been an interesting season. I think the fans are somewhat disappointed in the record, yet they're hopeful of what this team has done in October and can do down the stretch in November.
The end of the Miami game, Bill, is probably the most debated play of this college football season so far. I mean, you were there looking at it. Did you have any clue what was happening at the time? And how long did that take to sort out in real time, trying to figure out how that game ended?
It was between 5 and 6 minutes to find conclusive video evidence that it was not a catch and they should overturn the call, which really puzzles a lot of people. Even the officials that popped in on the TV side, they always bring in the experts. They always say that you need conclusive video evidence, but you don't. You don't. And they waited 6 minutes, just under 6 minutes, and overturned the play. That's the first time that, since I've been at Tech, where you won a game, the scoreboard showed you won, the team storms the field, it's over, right? Your training staff, your equipment staff, they're packing up. And then, no, Miami won. So it was really hard, but I'll say this. So the Hokies haven't lost since that, and I think that goes to Brent Pry's credit. That could have been a real crusher emotionally whenever you lose a game like that, where you thought you had won it and played pretty well and thought they had beaten Miami. But they've played great in the 3 wins since, the 3 games they've played. So they're 3-1 in the league coming up to the Dome on Saturday.
Yeah, I'd say when stuff like that happens, right, like a team can be reeling for weeks after. It can derail your season. What has it shown you, Bill, I guess, that it didn't? Now we're seeing, I think, the Virginia Tech we all thought we were going to see before the start of the year. Yeah,
I think, well, first of all, Pry, right at the very beginning at Hard Rock Stadium, I think he could sense it like any coach would, right? I mean, you lose a game like that, and you feel like you've won. Miami thought it had lost. I mean, they had done everything but shake hands
and get on the bus. Because it had been so long, it was very surreal to wait. You had guys on both sidelines on their knees. They showed the replay. I bet they showed it a dozen times on the video board, and you really couldn't tell. But I thought this was one of the key moments of the season, and now we'll see how it plays out right in November because there's a whole month of football left. But Coach Pry, after the game, said to the guys in that locker room after the Miami loss, he says, "Do you want another shot at Miami? Do you want them again?" And to a man, of course, they're like, "Yeah, we want those boys again." He says, "All right, fine, you got to win out." And so they got a little hunger out of it. I mean, you can't be down and sulk. There's been many games over the years where you left a stadium and thought you had the game won and didn't. Usually doesn't take so long after the game, but they played great since then in the 3 games since, much better than they did early in the season.
All right, so and obviously there have been plenty of wacky moments between Virginia Tech and Miami over the years for sure. But as you said, Bill, it's all wins since. Only one league loss here. We know how it is in 2024. We'll get the first playoff rankings coming up next week.
Yeah.
Top 2 teams in the conference get to go to the title game. We've heard Fran Brown talk about it all year. How much is that driving Virginia Tech this year? The idea that's all out there, that's all still possible.
You know, I think that it's been kind of week to week, and the reason I say that is that they're focusing really, like this week. They're not talking playoff or the Clemson game next week. They've been really focused on SU. You know, the guys on this team have heard about every other minute that they've only won 2 games all time at the Dome. And they've been harping on that over and over. And they've shown them the plays. They've shown the SU fans storming the field. They've shown the McNabb throwback pass to Brominski. They're showing these guys what this game meant back in the Big East. You know, it was never like the biggest game on the schedule for either team, but there was always something on the line for the winner. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't like it was never a rivalry game, but it was always a very important game in the Big East. And I'd like to get it back to that point now in the ACC where there's a lot on the line. And Tech's margin for error, of course, after losing a couple of games, losing 3 games, is 0. So they've got to play really well. They're a bit banged up. They're on the practice field now, and the good news for Virginia Tech fans is both the left tackle and the running back are out there practicing today in their regular jerseys. So I think that's encouraging from Virginia Tech's side because Bashal Tutin has been such a great running back this year for Virginia Tech.
Man, Tutin, it just absolutely lit up Boston College a few weeks ago. That was a special performance. And, you know, Bill, I'm glad you brought up those 90s games. I mean, so often both Virginia Tech and Q-State were ranked in those games, and there was a lot of meaning on it. And we know that, like, the players need to be educated on it because how would they know? They weren't alive. How much is the Virginia Tech fan base still tapped into that era? Because, up here, it's one where you're like, man, that was fun back in the time. It would be nice to have something like that again.
Yeah, I think, for the old timers, they remember so many great games. It seems like the home team always won. In fact, if you look at it, the home team has won 15 of 20. And they started playing, they started playing back in the 60s. It was I think 1964 is the first time Virginia Tech and Syracuse played. So there had been some games over the years, but it wasn't until we started and we formed the Big East. And, if you go back and look at it, I mean, the Hokies are ranked and SU is ranked and Miami is Miami and West Virginia has great teams. It was a really good league. We had the CBS television contract. Remember, the games were dynamite. And there were some classic plays. Really, really good NFL players were the stars of these games for both teams. And it took sometimes a heroic effort from a McNabb or a heroic effort from a Vic to win the game. And, both stadiums were ordinarily completely sold out for the game. So it was a lot of fun back in the day.
The last Virginia Tech win in the Dome would have been a Michael Vick game when he got sacked. Well, he got sacked 4.5 times by Freeney, but also ripped off like the game-stealing touchdown run in the game at the same time, going way back. We got Bill Roth with us, voice of Virginia Tech. This year's Hokies team, you mentioned Tutin. Man, he was impressive against Boston College. Had the ankle injury last week. Sounds like he's as good to go, right? That's what you said. Coach Price said he's practicing, because that obviously would be a huge factor in this game if he's not 100%.
Well, Coach Price said he's probable. That's what the coach said. So we'll see. I mean, it was a really interesting week on. I'm trying to remember what day it was. I guess it was Monday. Jalen Lane, Virginia Tech's receiver, was on ACCPM, the afternoon show that the league puts out on its network, and he jokingly called Tootin a drama queen for limping off the field, which, of course, that's he said it jokingly, but that's kind of the chemistry that this team has. It's a really good group. They've got really good chemistry. And so what Coach Pry talked about in his press conference was Jalen Lane is not an MD, and drama queen is not an official status for the game. You're either doubtful, probable, questionable, or good to go. So the media got a big kick out of that. I think the guys got a big kick out of it as well. I think Tootin is one of the more exciting backs that Virginia Tech has had. He's not a big guy. He runs low to the ground. He leads the league in broken tackles. He leads the league in touchdowns with 14. His stock clearly went up after that BC game with a 260-plus yard effort. He's like Allen. He catches the ball a bunch. He's a good receiving back. So if he's healthy, Virginia Tech has a much better shot. If he's not, they really rely on him a lot. Virginia Tech is a running team. Clearly, the number one rusher on the team is Tootin. The second leading rusher is the quarterback, Drones. And it doesn't take long watching the tape to know that the Hokies want to run the football. They're gonna run it a lot, and they're kind of the opposite of SU in a way. They're not going to live and die by the passing game at all. If they don't have to throw it, they won't. But not that Drones can't throw the football, and the Hokies have some solid receivers, but it starts and ends for Virginia Tech on the ground.
Where have you noticed Drones' growth this year? I mean, he was fantastic in that game down in Blacksburg against the Cuse last year. What's he performed like this year, Bill?
In a way, some of his numbers were better towards the end of last year. I think the one thing that is missing from his game is they've not hit a lot of the home runs. He had some guys running open in the Rutgers game, missed them both. There were two deep passes at Vanderbilt that he missed. If the call doesn't get overturned, the Kyron Drones, the Daquan Felton final pass of the game becomes a play in Virginia Tech lore, a deep pass.
Right.
And in his mind, he made the throw, and it still got called incomplete after replay. So, he hasn't had the home run balls. That being said, he's such a threat to run the ball. He's a big guy. He's not like little Diego Pavia back there running around. He's a big Texas stallion at 6'3", and he's hard to bring down. And if he runs and he gets 4 or 5 yards and he falls forward, there's another 3, it seems, each time. So he's a real physical guy back there, and he and Tootin give Virginia Tech a real 1-2 punch running the ball for sure.
We got Bill Roth here, the voice of the Hokies, and, you always start talking offense. That's just the way it is. Yet when you look at Virginia Tech, as good as those two guys are, the best guys on the defensive line, is it not? Antoine Powell-Ryland is having an unbelievable season, 11 sacks here, barely halfway through. Well, how do you slow this guy down? Can anybody block this guy? How good has he been this year?
The Hokies have 2 defensive linemen that are transfers, and they've done great. APR is from Virginia. He played at Florida. And when the Gators changed coaches, when Napier went in there, Brian, they changed their defense from a 4-3 to a 3-4. He wasn't a linebacker. He's not a tackle. He's a rush end. And he transferred back home to Virginia. And as the gentleman that covers the Gators for the paper in Gainesville wrote this past week, since transferring from Florida to Virginia Tech, Antoine Powell-Ryland has more sacks than the entire Florida Gators defense in the 2 years since. So they miss him. And then Aeneas Peoples was an all-ACC defensive tackle for Duke last year, and he transferred in. So between those two guys, the Hokies have done really well in the portal, picking up some really good pass rushers and run stoppers up front. It starts and ends up front with Virginia Tech's 4 down linemen.
Yeah, certainly, guys, that Kyle McCord will need to be well aware of this coming Saturday in the Dome. All right, Bill, always great to chat with you. Safe travels up this way this week, and thanks so much for hopping on for a few.
You bet, pal. See you at the Dome.
There he is, our guy, Bill Roth from the Virginia Tech Sports Network, a longtime voice of the Hokies. Cuse grad.